Welcome to another edition of the Marty Chronicles on the Conservative Take platform. I'm Marty Nalitz, and I just want to remind you before I get started, you can view the content of the Conservative Take on a variety of different platforms. Of course, there's YouTube, but also Rumble, Instagram. So look in your favorite place for us. A lot of horrible economic news coming daily, it seems, in America anymore. And if you think if you think Joe Biden is unpopular in America, have you seen the TV spot in Saudi Arabia mocking Joe Biden and the vice president? It's, wow. And Saudi Arabia is technically an ally. So that's really something. And then, I don't know if you saw this or not, but evidently in the middle of a speech, a bird relieved himself on Joe Biden, flew over and just, well, you can picture it. I am told by people who were there that they thought the bird was screaming, "This is MAGA country," but that's unconfirmed. We'll wait for the trial for that. That's bad enough, but wow, the economic news that we're dealing with right now, it's just horrible. You probably saw that the latest consumer price index, that's what we colloquially call inflation, 8.56%. That is the highest it's been in 40 years. And that's awful. And I was talking to somebody about this yesterday, and they said, well, we got over it 30 years ago, we will today. Totally different today, and let me explain why. We've talked about this a few times in recent episodes, that our debt, our national debt, they always try to keep it out of your view. They don't want you to look at it too closely, because if you ever did, I don't know what we would do. $30 trillion. So a lot of people don't realize this. This is literally like having a $30 trillion credit card that, first of all, we keep running it up. And second of all we ever do is pay interest on it. So that's been the case for some time. Just to put it in perspective, our gross domestic product is right around $22 trillion. So our debt is so much higher than that. But here's the logistical, pragmatic problem with that. Historically, the treasury bond yield, that's the bonds that the government sells. Historically, a lot of very conservative and a lot of retirees would buy those bonds before they retired. And historically, you want the yield on that to be about 3% higher than inflation. It's laughably impossible because we have inflation at 8.5% and the yield is 2.72%. We could not possibly raise the yield to where it should be to fight inflation. And here's one of the problems with that. That $30 trillion debt, we could not afford to make the interest payments if they raised. That 2.72% is technically the government paying that out. If you raised that to keep track of inflation, in other words, raised it up to about 11%, or wherever, the government could not sustain that. They could not make the payments on the debt, on the interest on that national debt. So logistically, that's a huge, huge problem. So as a result, the interest rates in America have to be kept artificially low. They're not going to be able to get around this much longer. I saw one report that the Fed is going to start raising interest rates 0.5 point at a time instead of 0.25% at a time. So they're going to do that, but they have to keep printing money. Now, I've seen a lot of different reports on this. I'm going to use sort of a middle of the road. This is a middle of the road figure that I've seen, that literally 40% of all dollars in circulation today were printed in the last 2 years. That's kind of the conservative approach to what I've seen on that. So that's all over the place. So all they can do is keep printing money, which is going to lead to higher and higher inflation. And this day has been coming for a long time. It's been coming for close to 100 years, since 1933. We had just kicked off the Great Depression, what came to be known as the Great Depression. As part of that, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, FDR, he took us off the gold standard. Now, prior to that, what we call a dollar bill, I don't know if you know this or not, but they were called dollar certificates. You traded them for whatever services you had to get, but you could, in theory, go to a bank and exchange it for that amount of gold. Couldn't do that anymore. Roosevelt overnight took us off the gold standard and devalued the dollar by 41% overnight. Now, if you know anything about inflation, this stands to reason, right? Inflation is going to hit hardest the people who, I don't know how you want to phrase it, make the least amount of money or have the most tenuous existence, live day to day, paycheck to paycheck. That's who inflation is devastating for. And when Roosevelt did this in 1933, it literally took 41% of people's money and transferred it somewhere else. Inflation, more and more, is nothing but a huge transfer of wealth. So we had that going on, and it's one of the things, World War II came along and suddenly we started producing like crazy. But this gold standard and devaluing of the dollar were a couple of the things that led us to that. Now, as we try to move through this, I watched a program. I'm sort of a nerd. I like to watch things on a science channel, a history channel. I was watching a program about the engineering prowess of Rome 2,000 years ago. One of the reasons Rome was able to conquer the world and have this incredible empire was their engineering. They were so far ahead of everybody else. It was ridiculous. Their abilities, 2,000 years ago, they were making water flow uphill. Think about that for a second. They were able to engineer water to flow uphill. That's pretty good. I live in Pennsylvania, where the roads are in a constant state of repair and breaking down. They built roads in Rome 2,000 years ago that they're still using today. They were able to build harbors. And I don't know if you understand what goes into that. There's a lot of things that go into that. They actually invented cement, and they improved on what we use. They used ash. They used volcanic ash in it, and it allowed them to do things that we don't even do today. So anyway, this is what was happening with Rome. Yes, militarily, some of their engineering was allowing them to conquer everywhere. But their engineering was what allowed them to pull it off, more so than their military. Now, what happened with Rome? There's a lot of things you can talk about with the fall, the decline of Rome. But one of the things that's undeniable is the same inflation I'm talking about was running rampant in Rome 2,000 years ago. So, what did they do? They did what we're doing. They printed money. At that time, all coins were made of silver or gold. They were gold pieces, silver pieces. Well, since they were running out of silver and gold, Rome started just making it silver coated and not telling anybody. Well, after a while, the people, particularly the soldiers, started realizing they could rub the gold right off of it. And literally, a bunch of the Roman military quit and joined the Mongol, the barbarian hordes that ultimately decimated Rome. So, why am I bringing that up now? Well, it's an interesting point in this, what we're going to do about inflation. You know, we keep hearing this excuse coming out of the White House that this has to do with Russia. And of course, that's laughable on so many levels. But think of another one. I just mentioned a few minutes ago, our economy is about $22 trillion. Russia's is barely $1. Do you really believe they are the mouse that roared when it comes to this economy and the ability to drag our economy down? It's not going to happen. There's other things going on. I'm going to end with one last note. The Consumer Price Index came out yesterday. Today, the Producer Price Index, the PPI, came out. Very similar, sort of a cousin to the Consumer Price Index. And it registered the highest jump on record. Now, I want to make sure you're clear. The PPI has only been tracked, I believe, since 2010. But in the 12 years, we have never seen a jump up to 11.2%. Now, next month, I believe you're going to see that really pull up that consumer price index. So you got to pay attention to this. Listen, there is a guy on social media that many of you are friends with or follow, a guy named Ben. If you have the time, Ben has put everything I'm talking about down in writing. It's lengthier, but it's more in depth, and I highly recommend it. I'm going to leave it right there for now. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.